Hey everybody, what's up? Circus here doing a viewer requested video. I think this guy commented in every video we had for about a week saying, do the top 10 decks of all time in Duel Links and Rye. We're finally going to do it.
That's right. We took a whole 5 minutes to think about it. So
Yeah, well, there's only what, 3 years of decks to think about? And
yeah, and at the end of the day, a lot of it does kind of come down to personal opinion as well as what you thought was most dominant,
oh,
what other
people
people
are
thought was
already
most
in the
dominant.
chat right now, down in the comments, like, you guys are
Yeah, so
wrong.
remember these are our opinions, but we will attempt to justify them in
Yeah.
the next 10 minutes or so.
Right. All right. So let's start with number 10. I love this deck. Our boy Shows was a big fan of it. But it's as with most of the decks on this list, people grew to hate it with a passion.
Yeah.
And that was number 10 is vampires.
Yeah, so vampires are notorious for being like the most fair meta dominant deck out there.
Hmm.
They weren't overly overpowering, and they were actually quite simple to deal with. If you had any sort of, if you could destroy the field spell, or if you had
Yep.
any just destruction. Back then, we didn't have things like Raigeki Break, for example, so it was just harder to get that on-demand destruction. But if you did have something like that, they were actually kind of a piece of cake to take out.
Flip that
Um,
queen down as soon as she comes out.
yeah, and yeah, so it was definitely dom. Now, when it got stupid
Or the
dominant is
Grace. That's what
when
she was. The Grace. I'm sorry, not the queen. The Grace. As
yeah,
soon as she
the
comes out, you got
Grace.
to flip that thing down. Otherwise, you were in trouble.
Yeah, when the deck got super
Yeah.
dominant is when Kybercorp Bling got the buff,
Oh my
and
God. Yeah.
people have the
Yep.
prismatic enemy controller, and they would just
Yep.
on demand draw enemy controller. That's when it got dumb.
Yep.
But that didn't last too terribly long, just long enough for it to be just kind of stupid, and then we just got that out of there really really quickly. So, but after that, other stronger decks kind of came in as it felt like a new era, like and kind of as we go up in the list of these, it feels like a new era of Duel Links is evolving as we
Well,
go along.
there were a couple things I remember. Of course, Vamp Vamp for game. The suck.
Pam Pam for game, yeah.
That was always one, and then the Samurai Skull nerf really hit that deck a
Yeah,
lot.
that ban list was pretty disgusting.
So I don't know. All in all, that was, I think, maybe not the first, but it was one of the first bigger brain decks. I felt like, because there was a lot of plays you can make between the
Yeah.
graveyard and the
Well,
field and stuff, and
yeah, it definitely
managing your
wasn't
life points as resources. And
yeah, it definitely wasn't just swing wildly. You definitely had to think one turn in advance. So it was good. It was the
yeah.
most fair. That's probably why it's number 10. It was a dominant deck, but it was the most fair dominant deck I've ever seen kind of evolve out of the meta.
Now it's kind of funny that you said, we'll be moving up in power and whatnot. But for number 9, we're actually gonna be moving backwards slightly. Um,
Yeah. Talking a little bit about Harpies, Relinquished, all those like
yep.
first time meta decks. You had like Order to Charge, Dinos, and all that. We're kind of clumping them all together because they kind of rapidly changed the game as they came out.
Yep.
When the game first came out, everyone was like, "Oh my god, this Daedalus deck is insane! You pop everything on the board, and it's awesome." But then people were like, "It's just better to normal summon in Order to Charge your way to victory."
Yeah.
That's just a better
I
way.
I hated that card even back then. I hate that. I hate
And then the
order
Pegasus
charge. Oh
event
my God.
came like not even that far into, because I think the Pegasus event was already live in Japan before it came to global or something like that. I don't remember what
Okay.
it was, but Relinquished was out, and within the first two boxes, it was like, okay, you get your Sindri, your Sonic Bird, you get your Relinquished combos, and no one believed in Relinquished until like the second time the event came around. And everyone was like, "Wait, this is broken. This is the most broken thing." Da 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 da. And then Harpies showed up, and we're like, "You just pop the field spell, or not the field spell, the equipped monster from the Relinquish." And then it just felt like Relinquish couldn't do anything.
Right.
So that sort of meta shift that was happening with ultimately Harpies coming out on top, even going as far as doing like Harpies plus Relinquished. That was like a deck for a while.
Well, I think it
But
was funny
ultimately, it
that
was
what killed Harpies was they changed the skill, so basically you just started with the field spell on top of your deck,
Mhm.
and people lost their goddamn mind over it. They were just like,
Yeah.
"This is bull, man! I'm going -1 on this. This isn't fair." And it's like,
Yeah, and
that's
people still
how
played it a little bit after that, but
it just
ultimately it
wasn't
came
what it
out.
was.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just new boxes that killed the deck ultimately, which is really nice. It just kind of showed the power of that deck, and that deck was pretty much sleeping. I mean, you could build that deck almost from the get go in
Right.
Duel Links. It was just a few cards that had to come out that even made it better, like the Sonic Bird, not Sonic Bird, the Sonic Duck or whatever that was
Yeah,
called.
yeah,
It
yeah.
really started kicking up the meta
That was
with
what,
Harpies.
1750 or something
Yeah,
like that, or
with the field spell, you got more.
yeah.
Yeah, so it pretty much, the meta was shifting rapidly, rapidly. There wasn't really any competition. Everybody was just terrible at the game. Even people that were playing TCG were terrible at the game. There was all these crazy decks that
Mhm.
like last game, and then finally Harpies came out and said, "No, I am the dominant deck." So that
Right.
takes our number 9 slot from there.
I have to know now what Sonic Duck was.
I think it
I'm,
was 1750. I
is
think.
it? I'm looking at it right now. I gotta know. I gotta know. It is officially 1700.
Oh,
1700.
50 less than I remember. The 50 is the nostalgia.
Yep. All right, moving on then. This is the I think it's the number one fan deck, right? Number
Number 1 in
eight,
our hearts.
number one in
Yep.
our hearts, and it was around for a full year, kind of like another deck on our list. But it
Yeah.
seemed like heroes never die.
Hero deck. It is, so it's number 8 for a couple reasons. It has been dominant, but it was only like strictly dominant as in the best deck for relatively a short period compared to these other decks. But it never really fell out of the meta. For a little bit it did, and then the Stratos came back and brought heroes back in. Now they're sitting kind of comfortably, but every so often it just kind of feels like the deck it's not as dominant as it was when it first came out. When it first came out, it was ridiculous. People were swinging in Chalice for game, multiple mass changes.
Well, I'm thinking
Um,
of like even earlier when it was like that you had tons of malicious and you had different like things you could go into on the extra deck where people were using dangerous. Do you remember
oh,
that?
dangerous,
And
yeah.
going
That was
into
like when it first came
Trinity.
out, yeah.
Yeah, when it first came out, it was like
Yeah. But it
uh,
didn't really kick off till those mass changes and Anki started,
oh, then yeah, then it
Heroes
got
to really.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, when that came in, that's when heroes when they're strongest. They were just super, super good. They would just consistently OTK their opponent. Back then, we weren't really used to the speed of killing someone that fast. Back then, you
Right.
could normal summon, or you could brick, not do anything, let your opponent go, and you like guaranteed you weren't going to die.
You were going to get a second turn at least.
Yeah. But when heroes started coming out, it was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I guess I bricked, I'm dead. So
Yeah. You try to hit them with a Canadian or something like that, and they're
yeah.
like, "Nope, mass change," and you're like,
But I mean,
"Ah."
besides that one point, they really like they haven't been super dominant. They've just been meta relevant, which
Right.
which is pretty good. So,
Yeah. Not bad. All right, the next one.
oh boy,
Yeah, I think this is a deck that people just described as sacky, and they hated it. And it was nerfed and unnerfed and then nerfed. I don't know. There was a lot going on with this one.
good old Kawaki Miru.
Uh,
I
not
just feel
even.
like whenever this deck, it's still on the ban list now, which is crazy. Like
Yeah.
the original nerfs are still there, besides like the core and diamond core and Kawaki
Mhm.
Miru core, iron core. Those being swapped. The Maximus is still on the ban list. When they released this deck at full power, I was like, "Whoa, relax, Konami."
Yeah. It
You've got
was.
special summonable Maximus at 3. You had ice. You could protect your monsters from destruction. Constantly keep blowing up special summon monsters.
Yeah.
And really, this deck was dominant up until they banned it. And then you were like, okay, we're good. And then Kaiba Core Bling version came out, and you were like, oh my god, this is actually cancer.
Do
Like,
you
what is going
remember
on?
back in the day, Team Wars, people spending hundreds of dollars to get that
So much money,
prismatic
so
diamond
much
core?
money.
Yeah.
And I believe this was really the first deck, because before Kaiba Core Bling, because Kaiba Core Bling by far was the skill that created the most income for Konami for
Oh, it was
like per
ridiculous.
skill or
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. And the only other deck that really used it before that was Vampires, and they just wanted Econ, which
Which
is a
was
free card.
free. Yeah.
Yeah. So when that came out and people realized how much stronger Kaiba Core Bling Kawaki was compared to any other deck, it really was. If you were able to spend more money, you were. I know people even to this day that really aren't that great of a duelist, but they were in teams because their account had Kaiba Core Bling Kawaki Miru.
Right. Which was
So
when you can
there
just
you
draw that
go.
diamond core whenever you want. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was pretty disgusting. And even when we thought finally the deck is dead, Neos comes rolling in. He's like, guys, Neos
Oh, I
Kawaki, great
forgot
idea.
about that one. Oh my god. Yeah.
so, so
Yep.
and then that had to be nerfed. It kind of got Neos nerfed in a way with
Yeah.
switcheroo and everything. So really, it's just whenever this deck is meta relevant, it just becomes so overpowering and overbearing that it that's kind of why it's here. Obviously, it's an older deck, and you know, because it was banned so quickly and rapidly, that's kind of why it's a little bit lower on the list. But I think it's kind of an acceptable
Well, think
area.
about this. Think how sacky this deck was, and the monsters would self-destruct at the end of your turn.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
If you weren't playing
this
the Diamond Core, the damn thing would just blow up at the end of your turn, and they were still killing everybody.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
ridiculous.
just
It was
ridiculous.
definitely a deck where you hoped you drew a bunch of Cosmic Cyclones and to your Diamond Core for game.
No, absolutely ridiculous. Now the next one always will have a place in my heart. It was one of those decks that I loved and everybody hated. I mean, I've said that probably about everyone so far on the list, but this one was beyond hated. This was like people dancing on the grave when this one finally got its nerf, and it's the Sylvans.
Yep, the good old Sylvan set one pass. That was back in the day when you saw set one pass, you were like, well, I just lost.
Yeah, I can't
what,
attack
what
into
am I
that.
supposed to
Yeah,
do? And if you know, it's like you attack into it, you die. You don't
no,
attack into it, they flip it up, you die. It was pretty ridiculous. You know, but it wasn't so much the deck, and that's I think ultimately why I didn't break the top 5. It wasn't really the deck, it was just Duel Links in general did not have the monster destruction to deal with one set card,
right,
which is crazy when you think about it in today's metagame, right? Like, there's
right.
no way this would ever work, right? Alternate Dragon, right? Geki, Break, literally anything. There's so many cards that would stop that from happening.
Well, they
Um,
had the monster destruction. Remember with the
yeah,
Marshall
yeah,
leaf,
they had the
the
Marshall
Marshall
Leaf
leaf.
would
Yeah,
go
but you
through.
didn't have any way to do it back. Yeah,
And then this was also we were talking about before the video started when Grit was discovered, and oh lordy,
yeah.
because it really did
Grit
come down
Sylvans. Yeah,
to
that was
they,
disgusting.
yeah, because it came down to whoever set first would probably win. But now it turned into, okay, well, you went, you got me, but I have my Grit, I'm good, you know. And then Grit was super RNG. Whoever's Grit popped more, that was the victor of the duel. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah,
It was so
well,
dumb.
if you remember, that was the Grit where it would proc up to 5 times in a duel. It was before they nerfed it, so it was
Yeah,
just like there was like a
yeah.
weird probability that it would go off, and you could sit at one life point, and they could just
I
attack and
saw
attack and attack.
I saw somebody proc Grit from like 150 life, and I was like, I can't. I don't know what math is happening here, but it is
Right.
broken and needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And that was the
so
deck where they
yeah,
it was almost all monsters and they switched to like 3 econ or whatever, 2 econ, whatever was allowed at the
yeah.
time. And it
Playing
was
princess or whatever the
Rose Lover. Yeah,
Rose
Rose
Lover.
Lover.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just absolutely
Oh
disgusting.
God.
Yeah. Use the Rose Lover for econ take, and then yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I just got gross after a while. I love that deck. I absolutely loved it. All right, moving on. We should have got Neg in here for this one. He could probably talk for hours and hours on it. This is the deck that just got hit, and everybody. I think if everybody was dancing on the Sylvan's grave, they're break dancing on the grave of Sabers right now.
Yeah. This deck, it was almost it was basically nerfed on its birthday.
Yep.
But you know, a lot of people they forget full power E-Sabers when E-Sabers came to their full strength was on the release of Purgatrio.
Yes.
Um, you know, some people said, Purgatrios, you just can't do it. It's just Neos Flip Flop Frog is way better. Casitas got nerfed. So then people were like, wait a second, piercing damage? That's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
So you know, the Element Sabers was born, and from then they were definitely the most dominant, if not one of the most dominant decks. You know, Dark Lords is kind of in there, which we'll talk about later. But
Spoiler.
spoilers.
Spoiler.
But it was just crazy because it felt like no other deck could really handle getting the Purgatrio Turbo at that point. And
Right.
even if your opponent, if you even have back row and everything like that, whatever, they could just out resource you. And back in the day, they could just play Cosmic Cyclone. There'd be times
Oh
where
my
I
God.
would see
Yeah.
people Cosmic Cyclone their own palace just to get
Yeah.
the
Just.
sorcery's conduit off
Yeah.
because they knew they had game. No one played Sphere Karibo really, so
Right.
you know they were like, whatever. I'm taking game right now.
Right.
So it was around for a long time. Even after its nerf, it was so powerful. It lost Cosmic Cyclone. It lost like the deck did terrible against all these other decks, losing Casitas to 1, and it was still
It
one
still
of
kept
the
going. Yeah.
best decks. It was still winning tournaments. It was still, I think it won like 3 KC Cups in a row or something like that, 3 or
Yeah.
4 in a row. It was some crazy number. And you were just like, yeah, this deck's literally winning on all fronts: the community tournaments, the official tournaments, the friendly
Yep.
rivalry duel. It's just winning everywhere.
And
So it
for a
was
long
really
time,
hard.
even at the end of its lifespan, it was still really good. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't winning as many tournaments, but we definitely saw it top 8 all the time.
Yeah, and while,
All the
you know, I
time.
wouldn't say it was ever like a tier 0 E-Saber meta, there's definitely other decks you could play during that meta. It definitely was, it felt like a gatekeeper of the meta. It's like, hey, I got this great idea for a new deck. The first thing on everyone's mind, how does this beat Casitas? Tell me how it
Right.
beats Casitas, and then I'll let you into
Yeah.
the
How
meta.
do you out
I don't
Concitus?
care
Yep.
about anything else. How do you out Casitas, and I will let you into the meta. And then some decks, they literally look at their deck and be like, I don't, and then they throw it away.
Well, that's what happened to Desperado, right? It couldn't get
Yeah,
over Concitus.
Desperado is very, very
It couldn't
powerful.
get him with the effect of
Yeah,
Desperado Barrel Dragon, so and it
you
couldn't
can't get them
attack
with
over it.
anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, this is back before we had Samurai Destroyer, and even before and after we got Samurai Destroyer, there was no way for that deck to make Samurai Destroyer. So people were
Right.
just like, "Yeah, what do we do?" They were like, "I guess we could just play Concentrating Current and swing into it and hope for the best." And you know, obviously,
That didn't work,
trap
yeah.
trap card said no to that.
Yep. So
So
all right, moving on then. This is okay. Back in the day, um there were things, we have like in-game events now and no one does them because they're worthless, right? But
yeah.
there was in the first year of the game, there was the roaming
Oh
Joey
yeah.
event. And if you
Oh yeah.
missed that event, you could not play this deck because there weren't tickets and there were no other way to get this deck. And the people that did farm it would kick your ass repeatedly on the ladder. And that was
Yeah.
Red Eyes. It was just absolutely disgusting.
Fair warning, anything above this list is either tier 0 or close to it.
Right.
Red Eyes is probably one of those weaker of the tier 0s, but it was definitely Red Eye Zombie with the Kazuki, the Spirit Dragon, all like full power. It was ridiculous. You know, even though Red Eyes himself was not the strongest monster ever, just the how fast
Right.
the cards were coming at you. You know, you'd go and be like, yeah, I set one pass, and then all of a sudden, bam, Red Eyes, 3 Red Eyes on the board, and Kazuki and all this stuff, and you're just like, okay, relax. That's way too much to handle in a single turn.
Well, even before that, when they first came out, they were a crazy control deck. They'd go first, they
Yeah.
get their trap set, they get their vanilla Red Eyes in the grave, and then in your draw phase, they'd summon their Red Eyes, and then when you go to summon your monster, they'd flip over Champ's Vigilance, and you're like, I
Oh
guess the
yeah,
game's
back when
over
it was
because
free.
I
It's
can
like I
only
can't.
normal summon. This is the only deck that special summons right now, so I guess I'm out.
Yeah, that was ridiculous.
They had to
Of course,
nerf Champ's Vigilance over it. It went to 1. Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I think Chip Spins ultimately got nerfed when 3-star demotion kind of came in too, when
Yep.
Dark Magician and Blue Eyes were doing it. But this was definitely one of those original abusers. That's
Yep.
when people realized, well, you know, with the power of Kazuki, you can just send your Red Eyes to the grave and then summon him in a single turn, and then
Yeah.
literally just be on a turn with Kazuki, Red Eyes, Zombie, and 2 back row. Set,
Right.
and your opponent would be like, okay, what do I do? If I do anything you econ take me, I lose.
Right.
So it was really powerful archetype. Not quite tier 0, but definitely a solid tier 1 deck at the time that was just dominating everybody. And like you said, it was a roaming event, and you know it didn't come to tickets till much later.
Right.
So if you didn't have it, it just caused such a great divide in the Yu-Gi-Oh community.
Turns out though, perfect counter to Red Eye Zombie, Golden Flying Fish. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Hey, let's
Just gonna throw that
go.
out there.
Undefeated, baby.
All right. Okay, moving on. This is where it's just gonna start getting sick, you guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When I first, I used to call games in the competitive community on Twitch. If you guys don't, there's this thing called Team Wars. It's a team-based competition, and I would cast games for them. And my first game I ever did, both teams are allowed to send in 5 people, each with their own deck, right? Or they get 2 decks. Each person gets 2 decks. So each team has 10 decks. And usually they have a variety of decks. It's like, okay, we're going to bring all these different decks and to see what our opponent brings and we can try to counter them, all this stuff. There's all this strategy involved. The first game I did, 10 for higher decks. Because it was such a dominant deck, no one wanted to play anything else. They'd even risk playing anything besides this deck.
Well, it's just crazy because, you know, this is where we start really getting into that tier 0 territory.
Yeah.
For hire being the weakest of them, because there were decks you could play into it as a counter, but
Right.
sometimes it was just better to throw your own for hire in there and just try to beat it, you know?
Right.
Instead of hoping that you get a good hand with the counter. Because if the counter failed, oh boy,
Right.
you're the whole game plan is just wide open for hire to run away with the game.
Yeah.
Um,
Just
so
it was an easy game to call because it's just
yeah,
one deck over and
and it
over
didn't
and
help
over.
too that the how cheap this deck was
Oh my god, yeah, it
to
was in a
get.
mini. Yep.
Everybody had access to it. It's extremely easy to play. It's not necessarily one of the harder decks to play. And then, of course, with the old beatdown that you could just use whenever, and you only have to
Yep.
have one level 5, and it affected all your little boys as well. This deck was just like bombarding every other deck with how fast a special summoned, its negating power, its special summoning
Dynalock.
power.
Anybody remember
Dynalocking was
Dynalock? Oh my
disgusting.
god.
It was just really, really, really hard to you know say, yeah, I'm going to play something into for hire. And that's when a lot of people, with if you ever took a break from Duel Links, a lot of people took a break during that era because it was like, yeah, I have a really nice cheap deck to go into, but God, the game is so
Everybody's got
boring.
it. Well, if
It's
you
like
were
if I
playing on the ladder, you get your first 4 cards, and
yeah,
you know the other guy's playing for hire as well. You just know it. You get your
yeah.
first 4 cards, you're like, I'm going first, I lose. Or you get your first 4 cards, you're like, okay, I win. Just depending if you went first or second and what your first
Yeah.
4 cards were.
Or even you'd be like, oh, hey, I'm going second. I can sack this guy. And he brings out the whiz and he's like, oh, well, I guess I lose.
Yeah, I
He's
guess.
gonna
Yeah,
negate me and
yeah, it's
end of the
over.
day. So,
Yeah,
but there were a lot of mirror matches. It didn't matter where you went, community tournaments, ranked, whatever. There was for
yep,
hires as far as the eye could see.
yeah, it was terrible. All right, now this next one is the one I hated the most. It almost made me want to quit casting tournaments because the games would go on forever. It was pretty much a stall deck. It was just disgusting. I hate this deck. I hope you guys that still try to play it lose every match. And that is Dark Lords.
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
done.
when
I'm
you
done.
really look at Dark Lords, it is so hard to argue that they were not a tier 0 deck. A
Yeah.
lot of people are like, "Oh, no, you could just play so and so and to counter it."
No.
But like in reality, Dark Lords did have an answer to everything as long as you took the time to think of an answer to everything.
Right.
Um, you essentially had infinite life points. So most of the time it came out to a deck out game, and that usually was the strategy. If all other strategies fail, I'm done playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm gonna stall until you deck out.
I'm gonna
You
have
can't stop me.
20,000 life points. What are you gonna do? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you finally break the lock. It's like I drew my Cosmic Cyclone finally, and they're at like 40,000 life, and you're like, huh,
Right.
I don't know what to do now. It's like you
Right.
just lose.
Or just
This deck,
infinite negates, basically.
yeah, this
That's
deck single-handedly nerfed so many skills. Beatdown,
yep.
no mortal can resist.
Yep.
Compensation. It
Everything
just
it touched. Everything it touched.
everything it touched just eventually got nerfed because this deck manipulated life points better than any other deck at the time, and realistically still does. The only one that even comes close is Arrow Mage, and Arrow Mage is extremely susceptible to disruption, where Dark Lords weren't. They would just negate monster effects over and over and over and over and over. And when it first released, people forget when it first released because it was nerfed relatively quickly. Like compared to these other decks,
Mhm.
it took a pretty heavy nerf, but unfortunately, so did everything else in the meta. So it didn't really matter. But when it first came out, the first thing that was on everyone's mind was the Hey True Nade into the Desire OTK. That was the only thing they were thinking about. And then people
Right.
realized, wait, this deck can OTK, but then it can also just heavily disrupt your monster effects. Okay, that's kind of annoying. And then they realized, wait, this deck doesn't deck out. Period.
Right.
So over time, people started slowly realizing this deck is absolutely broken. And if they never did the initial nerf as quick as they did it, I do believe that people would have looked back at this deck and just be like, yeah, that was a tier 0 for sure.
It was just so
That's
oppressive
ridiculous.
because you always felt like you said you figure out one way to get around the deck, and they're just like, nope,
Yeah.
not gonna let you because all the things you named. But then you forgot to mention like just their attack points and their defensive points on those monsters. They were just huge.
Yeah.
It's like how do you get over them half the time, even if
Yeah.
you could? So I just hated that deck. I hated that deck.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's gone.
Now, before we reveal number one,
Oh
we have
yes, yes.
2 honorable mentions for you.
Oh, what's that? I know one of them.
One of them is Bamboo. Sprite with Bamboo. That was stupid because you would just
What
draw a bunch of cards and then OTK your opponent.
and if you
FTK. your
if you
opponent.
guys remember, I think it was the first world champ Timmy. Does anybody remember him? Timmy, he was the first
Oh
world.
yeah.
He had
Yeah.
that deck built before they released it and talked about how it was just gonna, like, he built it in his head basically and was just like,
Yeah.
this deck
That
is gonna
was
dominate. And if you
that
watched his
was
stream, he was talking about it
gross.
all the time. So day one that thing came out, he built it and just started dominating with it, and it just
Yeah,
spread
Konami looked and
everywhere.
said, "Ooh,
Yeah.
my bad." And then
Oops.
the other one that you guys are probably expecting on the list that I actually just thought of, Six Samurai. Totally forgot about that deck.
Well,
But I
I'm
would
gonna.
still not rank it.
I want to throw another one in there too. Amazons, an honorable
Oh yeah,
mention.
and Amazon's. Yeah, yeah. Amazon's as well
You
was
can insert those anywhere you want on the list, below
you pretty much
number 5.
Six Samurai was super dominant, but it was like immediately emergency nerfed. I think it was like a week or two. It was
Yeah.
immediately emergency nerfed, and then it just like didn't really. It just kind of fell off after that. Yes, people were playing heavy, like lava golem, stall decks, stuff like that. But then Neos came out and kind of quickly was like, "Nope, you're not dominant anymore. Get the hell out of here."
Right.
So while it was extremely dominant for it's just kind of the same thing with Karakuri before Ancient Gears came out. It was just immediately kind of swept up and kind of put into this position of not really dominant anymore. It had answers. It was one of the first. Amazon's, you could actually kind of switch Amazon's number 8 with Heroes. I feel like you can kind of swap
I
those
was gonna
two.
say it was right around maybe Sylvans too, because they were kind of all out at the same time.
Yeah, it
Heroes,
was like a rock
Sylvans,
paper scissors. Yeah.
Amazons, yeah.
So you can kind of put them in there. I still think compared to like comparatively, I would have ranked Heroes just stronger in general, just because of their OTK potential. They also
Right,
could
right.
consistently did well in KC. That was another honorable mention we could put in there.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of decks that we didn't mention that people are going to put
What
in
about
the
my
comment.
deck?
Right,
Ancient
right.
Gears. Ah.
But these are the ones that immediately came to mind to us. So I think these are the ones that are definitely the most dominant.
Yeah.
And so number one, this deck shocked the whole game when it first came out, to the point
Yeah.
where it's like, when I first saw it, when I first played against it, I didn't know Yu-Gi-Oh like this was possible. It's like I summoned my one monster, set my one
The
card. Now it's
future
your
is
turn,
now, old man.
and then and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you sent my monster to the graveyard and killed me on turn 2. I've never heard of that before. And if you
Yeah.
don't know what that is, that's Cyber Angels. Holy shit.
Yeah, that deck is
Light
if
years ahead of its time when it came
you
out.
can argue any of these other decks, you could have been like, yeah, it's not a tier 0. This had counters. That everybody was playing Cyber Angel. You had to play Cyber Angel. You couldn't even do ranked without playing Cyber Angel because that was the only thing on the ladder.
Right.
Cyber Angel and how like other versions of Cyber Angel made to counter Cyber Angel. You
Right.
couldn't even play like side deck cards properly because they had the destruction of negation, the ritual in the grave.
Yeah.
You couldn't even stall them out. I've seen people that were trying to do like the extra stall and stuff like that. That didn't work because Cyber Angels could stall better than you. They could just cycle their Dakinis indefinitely,
3
and they
Dakinis
had
was
just
disgusting.
and they
Yeah.
just had ridiculous attack power. And it's like, I'm gonna swing into a wall of D. Oh my god, your monsters have 7,000 attack points. It doesn't matter.
Right.
you know, it was just so gross how powerful that deck was, and it was really it just came down to what skills are being used. The mind scan version, so you could play. And that's how good it was. Mind scan was like a meta skill, just so you can. Oh, do you have econ? Oh, you don't. Okay, you lose. Oh, you do have
Right.
econ. Okay, I'm not gonna activate my skill.
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
There was the grit version was really disgusting. The deck was nerfed several times, and it was still disgusting until the dragon version came out, and that was gross. And then eventually, it just slowly got power crept and nerfed, but as long as that deck was relevant, it just really, really felt like it was pointless to try anything else, and it was totally free to play.
Yeah,
Like you
that
could
was
totally
crazy.
play
That's
deck
why
for the
everybody
play.
had it. It was just disgusting because, like I said, it was light years beyond everything else that was out at the time.
It wasn't even close. Like
Yeah.
because it came out basically with the release of GX. It was an Alexis. You could farm all the stuff from Alexis. Really, you just had to get the Senjus, which was in an old box at the time. And yeah, at the time, a lot of people were coming back and they realized how strong and powerful that deck was, compared to like Zombie, Red Eye Zombie back then, which was, really
Right.
strong, right? And they were just like, yeah, there's just no point. This is the only deck that's worth using. You could try stalling if the opponent is dumb and plays into your stall, but
Yep.
you know, like, yeah, we put the, what's it called, the parasite into your
Oh,
deck
yeah,
and
yeah.
call it a day. So, but I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, most people, like 90% of people, were playing Cyber Angel, and then other versions of Cyber Angel made to counter your version of Cyber Angel,
Yeah.
and it was not fun. It's
Either
not.
you had Cyber Angel or you were farming to get Cyber Angel.
Exactly. Either you have Cyber Angels or you just got clapped by one, so now you're going to go back to PvE to farm it because you
Right.
realize how futile it is to even try.
Yeah.
Like, the only counter was just a Cyber Angel player that was following the flow chart, hits yes on Dakini, econ take, he just screwed himself and he loses the game.
Right.
That was like the only counter, and then
Yeah.
econ take.
Oh my god. So I hope you guys liked our top 10 list. I'm sure you're already hating it and already in the chat. Rye, you forgot this one. Circus, you're an idiot. You forgot this one. That's
Yeah,
all right.
if you guys
Let
disagree
us
with
know
our
what you guys
list,
think, definitely.
yeah, for sure.
I'd love to see your list. Go ahead, make top 10 lists in the chat. How about that?
Yeah, make the top 10s. PM me. Be like, no, 6 scams. It doesn't matter. They were still dominant even after da 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 da. Even though they lost immediately to Neos when it came out.
And every response we're gonna give is thank you for playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links.
Exactly. Thank you, boys.
All right, we're gonna get out of here. I'm Circus. That's Rye.
Bye bye.
See ya.